Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, mostly from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, media gadfly himself, Arif Hassan. Arif, is there anything more terrifying than an offensive lineman making choo-choo noises at you?
I can't. We discussed this actually before the show, and we couldn't come up with anything except the same person making choo-choo noises at you in a different sport. That is actually more terrifying, but the fundamental premise remains the same.
Just terrifying. Whether he's chasing you down, which happens, or whether he's blocking for Emmitt Smith. Just the sheer terror that you would feel in your bones. Justin Tuck, of all people, there's a video going around today about involving Justin Tuck describing this as something that he was going through and was terrified of. He was purposefully avoiding it.
Yeah, he kept on trying to switch sides, playing against Larry Allen, and sometimes he just couldn't do that, couldn't swing it. And when a run was coming his way, Larry Allen let everybody know. Not much you could do about it.
That's like Terry Tate, the Office linebacker, when he was prepping up a run. I just thought of that. Like Terry Tate, the Office linebacker, doing the pain train's coming, woo woo. That's it.
And he's just running in place for
Yep, that's what you're dealing with. So yeah, that's some of the great stories have come out about an amazing player who passed away today, and that's one of my favorites. He was chasing down people, making train noises, letting you know that he was coming. That is absolutely ridiculous. Welcome to this special edition of Norse Code. We were not expecting to record this week. However, the JJ news that came out at about 8 o'clock this morning it seems like it's important enough to do a show. So we are going to be doing an emergency pod today, just like everybody else. And we have lots of stuff to talk about involving it, including the details of the extension, how it affects the Vikings' future, the cap, all of that. We also want to take a special moment, or at least I do, to discuss how the media tried to frame this extension before it happened. Whether they were just making things up or speaking out of both sides of their mouth, it's worth talking about. And then the mailbag as well, and Arif has a special comment on on what's been going on with WNBA coverage as well. So before we get to any of that, thank you so much for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like to help us out financially, there's a couple of things you can do. You can head over to patreon.com/norsecode for $3.50 a month, or a little less for the year subscription. You get access to bonus material, which we just put out another episode there. You get access to the Discord, where we've been having a lot of fun recently, and so much more. You can also go to paypal.me/norsecode as well if you want to give a one-time donation, or you can go over to norsecode.threadless.com as well and give us give us money. Yes, that is the general principle of a merch shop. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But you can get things like shower curtains, you can get things like t-shirts, you can get things like baby onesies, you can get the Arif Wiggler stickers that have been selling well. Check it out over at norsecode.threadless.com. Everything that is involved in the purchases here or the Patreon stuff, all that helps send us out to London, which we have discussed. Arif is trying to get a trip to Germany out of this. I am just saying that London is the goal. I'm setting my bar at London. Anything else that happens there is fine, but London is where I need to go to make up for what happened 2 years ago.
So, I mean, we've been, or someone in the Discord has been researching about whether or not there is a city in Germany named London, which that makes the most sense because I have no idea why you'd be trying to organize a trip to either Ontario or the United Kingdom. But Germany, I mean, that's where we want to go. So London, Germany, fine, I guess. But eventually we're going to want to make our way to either Munich or Berlin.
There you go. Well, we'll start small and see what we can do, but we are in fundraising mode at the moment. So if you are interested in helping us out, patreon.com/norsecode is your best bet, and we appreciate any listeners who have currently subscribed, or who are currently subscribed anyway. Let's get into the show itself. This is big. This is news that many of us that are not in the media were expecting. This is something that had been rumored for some time. and had been reported on as something that was close to completion, and now it is. Justin Jefferson has signed his extension. It makes him the most. He makes him the richest player in the league that's not a quarterback, as far as his contract is concerned, and this is good. It's finally done. He released a nice video thanking his family, thanking the team, and everything, and it's clear based on the fact the video was put out and the timing of it that this was something that they'd planned for a bit, and this was just time to announce it. Correct?
Yeah, there's like a couple of signs that was the case, right? I mean, the Vikings said after the draft that the reason that they didn't announce a Justin Jefferson deal right before the draft is they didn't want to overshadow the draft and all of these players that are having their dreams, fulfilled and having these wonderful moments. They wanted the Vikings not to take that moment away from them, and they wanted those players to own those moments. And that would suggest that the deal is functionally done. They're waiting on the right moment and time to announce it. Also, all of the tweets indicating that the deal had been signed went out at 8:01 a.m. Monday morning, which would suggest that they were all scheduled and that the people letting these reporters know, people like Adam Schefter and Albert Breer and Ian Rappaport and so on, said, hey, don't announce this until like 8 a.m. Monday morning. And they all agreed. And Tom Pelissero scheduled to tweet for 8:01, so Adam Schefter, and so did Albert Breer and so on, right? So either the Vikings or the Vikings agent or Justin Jefferson's agent or in concert with both of them. Also, the video that Justin Jefferson released on his Twitter and his Instagram was like produced. That didn't occur in the moment. Like, he didn't just sit down in front of his Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Award and just record an off the cuff video thanking like his parents and his brothers and the fans. That was like recorded like clearly over the weekend. So they had agreed to this for a little bit, right? And Jefferson probably didn't want to go to OTAs, and it'd be weird to sign the deal and then not show up to OTAs. So probably waited until OTAs were over, right before mandatory minicamp. And from a timing perspective, it's just ideal for the Vikings. It's also ideal for media, right? Because it's like a dead moment in time, and it's like very difficult to write some stuff. Anybody who has been like patiently waiting for stories from Wide Left has noticed there's only been 2 stories to the past 2 weeks. It's because there's nothing to write about. Yeah, it's a dead time in NFL media, and so this is good. It's good for us for this to happen, at least in the Vikings world. And so, yeah, it's like very clear. There's like a lot of indications here that this had been done for a while, and that they were just kind of waiting for the moment to announce it, and that's what they did.
Well, let's get into the specifics of the deal itself. There's a lot of guaranteed money here.
Yes, $110 million, which is like a little bit more than what Nick Bosa was guaranteed. That guaranteed money is the highest, I want to say, for any receiver. Certainly the highest of any. Yeah, I think it's the highest of any receiver, and perhaps the highest of any non-quarterback. It's a lot of money. Yeah. I just looked it up. It's the same amount of total guaranteed as Jalen Hurts, quarterback. Right. The next highest guaranteed in total money is Nick Bosa at like 88 million. And it depends on like how you calculate your guarantees, if it's fully guaranteed at signing or if you include functional or practical guarantees. Because I think if it's guaranteed at signing or fully guaranteed money at signing, like if he retired tomorrow, what amount of money would they be fighting over? That'd be $88.7 million, which is also more than Nick Bosa's $88 million. But functionally, he has $110 million guaranteed because the 2026 salary becomes fully guaranteed. So the rest of it, so some of it's fully guaranteed now. The rest of it becomes fully guaranteed in March of 2025, which obviously they wouldn't cut him then. So, yeah, it's an enormous amount guaranteed. As a percentage of guarantees, it's the highest percentage guaranteed in a contract for any multi-year contract a receiver has signed, over $20 million a year. So, for example, Stephon Diggs has 100% of his contract guaranteed because he's a 1-year deal with the Houston Texans, right? So it'd be kind of weird to compare those. But if anybody who has signed a contract worth at least, actually, I think it's at least 10 million a year, so long as it's like more than 2 years or more than 1 year. This is the highest guaranteed as a percentage of contract for any receiver. So, yeah, crazy, $35 million average, but there's also a little bit more here in terms of cash flow.
So, how does everything stack up as far as the years are concerned?
So Jefferson gets obviously, so right away as a signing bonus, he gets $38 million. That's like just that's like what the pocket money is right away, 37.5, around 38 million. That comes out right away, and then the rest of his salary this year, 1.1 million, adds up to like 38.1 million or something like that in terms of the total amount of money he gets this year. But his cap hit for year one is a signing bonus divided by 5 plus his base salary. That's it. That means his cap hit for 2024 is 8.6 million. Now, the interesting thing is that his base salary in 2025 is also quite low. It is 1.17 million. But there's a neat trick in the Vikings contract that doesn't count as fully guaranteed money at signing, but is fully guaranteed, which is that he gets a $30 million option bonus in 2025. Now, the way this works is that the Vikings have to opt in to continuing Justin Jefferson's contract in 2025 in order for him to receive this $30 million bonus. It is a signing bonus, and so it would get prorated out over the next 5 years. There's one void year on the contract. So in the contract, the Vikings are required to activate the option. So there's an option, and the Vikings are guaranteed to activate that option. But because it's not technically guaranteed at signing, it's just guaranteed to be guaranteed, it doesn't count as guaranteed money for the purposes of the way over the cap counts guaranteed money. So that's where the other like 110 come from, along with the 2026 money. And then also it means that the Wilfs don't have to put $110 million in escrow. They only have to put $88 million in escrow. So they will have to come up with $30 million next year, which I'm sure they'll manage. But it does change things. And so he has a second signing bonus that activates in 2025. So the first signing bonus adds a $7.5 million cap hit every year. The second signing bonus adds a $6 million cap hit every year. And so in 2025, he will receive $31.9 million. That's how much he'll receive. But his cap hit will be $15.2 million. So his cap hit year one is 8.6. His cap hit year two is 15.2. But in both of those years, he's receiving $40 million. Great. Love that for him. In 2026, he has 24.9, or let's just say $25 million in base salary. That's fully guaranteed. Plus, you've got the cap hits that come from the signing bonus and the option bonus. So that's another $13.5 million. So his cap hit in 2026 is $39 million, or $38.99 million. And then in 2027, he's got another amount of money, which I believe becomes guaranteed, or there's a contract trigger for that based off of what I read. And that's a cap hit of 43.5 million. And then in 2028, there's a cap hit of 47.5, and then a cap hit of 6 million in 2029 from the void year. Okay, great. What's likely to happen is that after 3 years, so for 2027, they will restructure his contract again. And so they'll probably guarantee the 2027 salary, which is 29.2 million, and turn that into a signing bonus and spread that out and so on and so forth. So the first 3 years are where all that money comes from. But what the interesting thing is that Jefferson receives more money in the first 3 years, just in hand, like cash in his bank account, than any other player has over the first 3 years of their contract, and some by a significant margin. So Nick Bosa is the only one that receives over $100 million in the first 3 years of his contract. You can take a look at some of the other receivers, and this is all stuff that Jason Fitzgerald outlines at Over the Cap. I highly recommend people check out his piece there because he explains it in a little bit more detail. But if you look at the other receiver contracts, whether that's A.J. Brown or Tyreek Hill or Amon-Ra St. Brown, who just signed, or Jalen Waddle, who just signed, the total amount of cash that they get through 3 years is about $20 million less than what Jefferson gets, even though some of them signed this year. Even though Tyreek Hill's average salary on paper is $30 million a year, most of that is backloaded into years where that contract is essentially not real. There's no guarantee for injury. There's no practical guarantee. There's no guarantee of any kind in the last 2 years of his contract. So the idea is that they would rework that contract in year 4 and restructure it, and he signs a new deal. So he doesn't actually see $30 million a year. He sees $25 million a year, practically speaking. A.J. Brown's new contract gives him $28 million a year, practically speaking. Jefferson's contract gives him a lot, a lot per year in the first three like actual years. It's actually $35 million per year. So his average is $35 million. The amount he receives in the first 3 years is actually slightly more than $35 million. Whereas Tyreek Hill got $25 million over the first 3 years. A.J. Brown gets a little bit less than that over the first 3 years of his contract, or actually a little bit more. It's like $28 million. So Jalen Waddle gets like $28 million. Amon-Ra St. Brown gets $28 million. Jefferson gets $35 million in real dollars per year for the first 3 years of his contract. So a lot of times when you see average per year, that's a more accurate understanding of their contract than the total, for sure. But there are still inaccuracies in it because of the cash flow and when the contract restructures and stuff like that. And agents and teams have begun exploiting that, so that instead of becoming the highest paid player in total, which is what people used to want, they wanted the highest paid player in average, because people started talking in averages. So they start creating new years in the contract that players are never going to see. It's not happening with Jefferson. He's actually getting $35 million a year for the first 3 years before it actually gets reworked. So there's a lot of cash in this contract. He is, on paper, the highest paid non-quarterback, and in reality, by a fairly significant margin, he and Bosa, the highest paid non-quarterback. It's not particularly close. And so he is actually a player that's receiving the amount of money that we throw around when we say this is his average per year.
It's beautiful to see a player who really deserves a good contract get it. Like, though the whole theme of like get that bag, but from everything that he's shown on the media, everything that he's shown on the field, Justin Jefferson, and everything that's been said behind the scenes, even by people that have been disreputable from the Vikings, like, everybody has said that, yeah, good for him. He absolutely deserves it. Fantastic player. How does this put, where does this put the Vikings necessarily as far as cap space, this year, next year, and that moving forward?
Yeah, so like I said, the cap hit this year is actually less than what the cap hit of his option was going to be. And so it actually lowered the cap hit that the Vikings absorbed in 2024, which means right now they've got $27.7 million in cap space, at least according to Over the Cap, who have included now the Jefferson contract in their cap accounting. Like, they could trade for a guy, they could extend another player and push that money into this year. More likely, they're going to roll it into next year when the Vikings have oodles of cap space, as people keep reminding me. Now, the cap will probably not expand next year by as much as it did this year, at least, again, according to Over the Cap's accountings, who typically increase the cap by 7 to 11% in their projections. Here, they only increase the cap by $5, or actually even less than $5 million. So if I do the math real quickly, by 2% as opposed to the 7 to 11%. And that might be because all of the money from the Amazon deal has already come through. I don't know yet. But that projected cap space for the Vikings, a lot of people said it's like $100 million. It depends on what the actual cap number is. If you increase it by 7% or 11%, that'll change too. But the cap space that the Vikings are expected to have is $54 million. And I know a lot of people are talking about $100 million next year. Some of that got absorbed by the rookies that they drafted. Some of that got absorbed by, Jefferson and so on, Grenard and so on. Fine. But I imagine a lot of that is just because of the difference in cap projections from what it is right now on the website versus what it was like during the draft when people were talking about it. Either way, the Vikings place about 8th in cap space by that calculation in 2025. So the 8th most. Great. That's going to be great for signing new veterans and stuff like that. In 2026, when Jefferson's cap actually starts making an impact, we'll have a drop off in the amount of free agents signed through 2026. And so the Vikings have over $100 million in cap. They have $122 million in projected cap space, but because so many teams are projected to see a bunch of players leave their books over the next 2 years, that actually drops the Vikings to about 10th or 11th in cap space in 2026. And then 2027, it's not even worth talking about. There's only 16 players under contract through 2027, which is actually more than most teams. And so they have $217 million in projected cap space, and that's in the bottom half of the league. So that's obviously fake. But for 2024 and 2025, the Vikings are in the top 8-ish for cap space. And then in 2026, top 10-ish. The Jefferson contract just doesn't take up that much cap this year or next year. It's really 26 and 27 where it starts putting some roster pressure on you. And the Vikings will still have JJ McCarthy at his like great contract value, and presumably he'll be the starting quarterback by then. And so you'll have like a lot of opportunity to move around. You're going to have to sign Christian Darrisaw, which the Vikings will have room for. You're going to have to, craft some extensions for some of the important players on the team. But yeah, I mean, the Vikings are in a very healthy cap environment right now.
And of course, by then, JJ McCarthy will have won Rookie of the Year and all that. So we can rest easy on that. So the signing is done. The hell else do we talk about for the rest of the summer? This is great. So
we've been robbed, really.
In a manner, yeah. I was talking to people earlier. I was like, we're gonna have to do a show tonight or today, and this was the only reason why we would have taped a show this week is if this news would have come out. I don't. That's what I don't even know what to do with my hands right now. This is phenomenal. So we no longer have this distraction. This was something that the news had come out that he was. I say the news had come out. I've got a rant about this in a bit, but the news had come out that he was originally offered $28 million, and he decided to play all of last season without signing the deal, and now he is getting more than 35. Like in the whole like betting on himself thing. That's pretty gutsy.
Yeah, I don't like so I saw that number floated around. Do you know who reported that?
That was a Schefter tweet.
That one is really tough for me, honestly. That's like a very okay, yeah, so it's over at ESPN right now. I'll take a look at it. So it might have been a cash versus average thing. Like it might have been the Vikings were going to pay him $28 million annually for a contract in 2023 in cash over 3 years or something like that. And that would have been higher than Tyreek Hill. And at the time, A.J. Brown, because no one had signed, Amon-Ra St. Brown hadn't signed yet. So no one had signed a contract worth $28 million in cash over a 3-year time span. I don't know, 28 to 35 is a really significant jump. I don't think that this was a betting on himself season, in part because he should have lost that bet, right? Like he missed like 7 games, right? Or 8 games, 7 games. Functionally 8 games. And the number got bigger. I think it was I'm more comfortable with waiting than you are season. And so, or maybe it is a betting on himself season, but it's not a prove it season. I think it's how some people characterized it. And it's like, well, he didn't prove anything that he hadn't already proved. And if anything, he had disproven some stuff, right? And the number got a lot bigger. that 28 million offer, like if it's from the Vikings, I imagine does not include a number that inflates the overall, because he would have to get paid more than Tyreek Hill, if only because that deal would have come a year after Tyreek Hill's and the cap had expanded by somewhere between 7 to 11%. And so you'd want to get him more than $30 million a year, at least on paper. Again, Tyreek only got paid 25 over the first 3 years of his contract. But so I wonder if that's it, that it's like a cash flow thing here. Um, but the Vikings have also said they think that he should get paid like the best non-quarterback in football, which they then did do. So 28 is a weird report.
Well, let's go to the fun part of this. Let's go to the shade, as it's been referred to. I had a number of people tell me today that fandom is about joy and not about spite, and I have to tell you, that's not how Minnesota works. Especially after the Wolves got bounced after the out of the last series. We're fueled by spite in certain ways, and because we're a small market team, I say we in the general sense, but because we're a small market team, something that happens is quite often is there's discourse about the team and ways to get good players out of the team. So you get trade mock-ups or whatever that are set out, and you get news that isn't news reported on. In fact, we spent a considerable amount of time last episode discussing the location of Justin Jefferson in New Jersey and how close it was to, say, Cheesecake Factory or medieval times, all that. There was a lot of discourse over the last, I want to say since December, but it might have been even before that, about how Jefferson was unhappy, Jefferson was trying to leave, Jefferson is going to leave because Cousins had left. That turned out to be hilariously wrong, and I just want to point that one out specifically. But there, for no reason at all. But there were a lot of people like Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport reporting articles or reporting things to be facts that they knew were not, based upon their messages today. And I just want to take a moment and a middle finger isn't the right way of doing it, but it was poor form on major news reporting to spend the last several months talking about, 'cause they're bored, they have nothing to talk about. I get it. But spending all that time drumming up a controversy that wasn't, and discussing a potential trade that was never going to happen, as the Vikings made perfectly clear to the Steelers and other teams.
Yeah, it was very weird that that became a talking point. Like with the Cincinnati Bengals and T. Higgins, that makes sense as a talking point for a couple of reasons. First, the Bengals have had a lot of difficulty retaining free agents. We saw that a couple of years ago. And they prepared for that, like proactively, like they knew they weren't going to be able to keep the safety that went over to the Atlanta Falcons. I forget his Jesse Bates. And so they drafted a couple of safeties over the next couple of years to anticipate that happening. T. Higgins wants a long-term deal and doesn't like the deals that have been offered to him by Cincinnati. He's made that really well known. And so they offered a franchise tag as the last kind of ability to retain him, and he still hasn't signed that yet, which is interesting. But he has been putting out the rumors himself that he's going to get traded, or at least his team has done something along those lines, right? Okay, great. That makes sense as like a kind of trade discussion. The way that Justin Jefferson has talked about this, the way that his team has talked about this, the way that the Vikings, have talked about this, it doesn't make any sense that there would be a trade rumor here. I don't know where it doesn't make any sense. Like, so there was specifically, like Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk, mentioned that the Vikings were going to trade Justin Jefferson and then draft Malik Neighbors during the draft. And that's why they waited until after the draft to indicate that they were going to sign him. But during the combine, the Vikings said they were going to trade him and that they were going to sign him and that he's the best non-quarterback in football. Like at the combine, they said that. And like, I get that, like, we've all experienced front offices that have said, we're not going to trade the guy, and then he gets traded. But the discussions that the Vikings have had about Justin Jefferson have been very proactive and like line in the sand, right? Um, and I'm so confused about this because now we're getting reports that other teams tried to call the Vikings about Justin Jefferson and have said in no uncertain terms is Justin Jefferson on the trade block, like other teams call, and the Vikings tell them, yeah, absolutely not. He's not going to get traded. So I have no idea. Like, if they were shopping him, they might put out a ridiculous price, an impossible to meet price, and say, hey, we want to keep the guy, but every player has a price. For us, it's 3 first-round picks and 3 second-round picks. It's draft day, right? Like, you got to give us the draft day haul. And then the other team would be like, well, I don't know. That seems like we'll give you 2 firsts. Like that's way too much. That's insane. We thought our price would be 2 firsts, and then the Vikings would hang up, and then later they would discuss, right? Like that. Like that's how you handle that, as opposed to why are you calling me, right? Like that. Like that is how you handle that. So I don't know where somebody like Florio would get that rumor, right? That the Vikings were going to trade Justin Jefferson, specifically that they would then also draft Malik Neighbors on top of that. That implies like some specific knowledge that clearly like he didn't have.
I love the Florio thing because the moment the news came out, he was trying to take a victory lap. Like he didn't spend the last 6 months putting out every possible take on it. And again, if you put out every single possible take that you could have on this, yeah, eventually you were going to be right on something. But you also spent a long time talking about how he's going to miss Kirk Cousins and he's going to leave.
Yeah.
Sorry if I'm being very specific. I woke up angry this morning when I was seeing all of the Ian Rappaport last week was on a show talking about the Neighbors trade. It's like, and like today he's talking about how that was nonsense. Like you were literally on Pat McAfee talking about it last week. How are you like? What is the cognitive dissonance that you live with on a daily basis that lets you do this? All right, sorry, I'm done.
I mean, that's like I get it. I get it. That's like when you get called to do all these shows, you've got NFL Network, you've got Pat McAfee, you've got all these shows, and almost certainly none of them listen to this podcast, for which I'm glad. But like I'm going to be very careful with my words. Then my impression is that the way that you manage these is instead of saying the same thing again and again, which you can't, you have to act on, and I'm not saying they're lying, you have to act on any new information that you think you have that's enough for you to throw out there as speculation. Not like a reporting fact, but like a speculation. So you might hear the Vikings are interested in Malik Neighbors from somebody, maybe even the Vikings, right? Some scout, the Southeast area scout, as Malik Neighbors is the top player on the board. And when he went into team meetings to discuss the player, the Vikings were very receptive and they had Malik Neighbors as the top receiver on their board or something like that, right? And so the area scout talks to Ian Rappaport. And then later, Ian Rappaport talks to a team, let's say the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the Steelers have had conversations with the Vikings about Justin Jefferson. They don't detail what those conversations are. So now Ian Rappaport gets some credible information that the Vikings are looking at Malik Neighbors, some credible information that a team called about Justin Jefferson, and then on NFL Network puts the two together. Great. That's the tweet, that's the video, that's engagement, whatever. And a week later, you go on to Pat McAfee's show, and Pat McAfee asks, hey, man, what's the deal with Justin Jefferson? Are the Vikings going to sign him or are they going to trade him? Like, what's going on? And, a couple of days prior, you had talked to Rob Brzezinski, and Brzezinski says, well, I mean, our deal is basically done. It's just a formality at this point. And you had a sense that was happening, but you didn't have that information a couple of weeks ago. So you say the Pat McAfee show, no way are they going to trade him. That's crazy. They love the guy. He's the best. Why would you trade the best non-quarterback in football? And so that's that. And every week you get like new information that allows you to put together a take that's a little bit different than the week before. But if you were to go to Vegas and place a bet, you would place that bet on him staying with the Vikings because you know where your most solid information is. But that's not how you're going to these different television shows and radio hits. That's what it feels like a lot, especially in the off season. That's what it feels like a lot of this is, where it's you don't try to put together all of your best information for one cohesive take or understanding of the situation, and then put that out there every single time you're asked to talk about it on radio or television or whatever.
No, that would be for a deep dive article like journalism. These are not journalists.
Right. I have a very broad definition of journalism, and I don't want to disagree, James, but I think by my
that pregnant pause had twins.
Yeah, it is. I'm going to argue that it's journalism, but I would argue it's not very good journalism. I would also say I'm not going to push back too much in what you said. How about that?
Is this that scene in where like he's out of line, but he's right? Like
kind of, yeah.
He's out of line, but he's not wrong.
Yeah,
maybe they just are dealing with the same thing you do, where they're on where they're on so many shows they forget what they say until they hear it.
Hey, that is a very strategic and selective amnesia. That's different.
Well, you don't remember your bad takes that way. It works. I'm saying the system works. I'm just trying to come up with a reason why there's that level of disconnect between the mouth and the brain. Like, that's all I'm trying to do. Or in this case, I suppose the brain and the thumbs for tweeting out such incredibly broad, incredibly ridiculous things, and then going, oh well, none of this was actually real. So I don't know.
It is. I think anybody who feels upset by that or hoodwinked by it has more than a very good argument to be upset by that or hoodwinked by it. I think anybody who is mad that is what happened should actually be mad. I'm not even going to be passive about it. Yeah, that's really annoying. Like, that's acting as if you knew that this was the case the whole time is disingenuous behavior.
I was here the whole time. That's
all right, Sam Reich.
That's the Sam Reich energy right there.
Yeah,
so I've been watching too much Dropout lately.
In fairness, he is the villain of Game Changers. So
oh, absolutely.
That does actually work here.
I just watched, or I just showed someone the coffee episodes of Game Changer. So it's absolutely
he's most villain probably in the escape room episode, which is one of my favorite episodes of Game Changers.
I have not seen that one yet. I am working on it.
It's oh god, it's incredible.
Well, let's stop talking about the what college humor became, and move on to the mailbag.
We mention a Brennan Lee Mulligan property once every 3 shows. That's I feel
fair.
like
that's about right. Let's go to the mailbag. We've got a number of mailbag things, a number of mailbag questions here, and then we've got some WNBA stuff near the end. So the first question is from Not Your Father's Dopamine, who asks, now that he's under contract, which team is most likely going to trade for Justin Jefferson?
It's got to be the Jets, right? There's the Florham Park thing, the nickname thing, Jettis to Jets. I mean, come on. Aaron Rodgers gets to throw to Garrett Wilson and Justin Jefferson. Incredible. And it would hurt Vikings fans a lot if that happened. So I think more than most, if you got traded to the Chiefs, you'd just be like, okay, I'm hurt a lot, but good for him. I'm sad enough that I'll die, but hopefully it'll be fast. Whereas if it's to the Jets, I think a lot of Vikings fans will be like, wow, okay, yeah, the universe is meaningless. That's incredible.
But you are a part owner of the Chiefs, so you would at least be consoled that way.
Yeah, I would. Solely to win arguments. I'm glad that they gave me that. But yeah, which actually I got to pull that out again because people have been telling me that I don't get to have takes again because I'm a Vikings fan, I guess. Not just the Packers thing with Jordan Love, but today even. because I laughed about the CeeDee Lamb thing, which we can
we'll do in a moment.
whenever it comes up.
Before we move on, can you in 30 seconds explain the Chiefs owner thing for anyone who hasn't anyone who's not aware?
Yeah, I mean, it was just like people have for like years, like people got into arguments with me, and they would end, which I know that's a shock, and would end arguments or attempt to dismiss arguments by saying, "Well, you cover the Vikings, you don't know anything," which I think is like very stupid, right? Or actually, they would just say you're a Vikings fan. They wouldn't even say you cover the Vikings, which would be at least more honest. But like, you're a Vikings fan, you don't know anything, which is like very stupid for a lot of reasons. Which is that when you're a fan of a team, you like get to watch other teams. Like they don't disallow you from watching other teams and seeing that like Patrick Mahomes is good at football. Actually, like being a Vikings fan doesn't disallow you from seeing other quarterbacks, right? And so I was like, well, that's stupid. So I'm just going to say I'm the Chiefs co-owner because now I get to win every argument. They just won a Super Bowl. They're about to win another one. And so I've seen the greatest team on the planet. And so now that I'm part Chiefs co-owner, I get to have an opinion on every team according to this logic. So that's what I'm going to do. And so I wrote that in my Twitter bio, started using that as an argument to win the stupid argument.
Which really feels like a game genie for an argument, quite frankly.
Yeah, honestly, when The Athletic hired me, I was like, hey, is that a problem, that joke? And they were like, no. And I was like, really? Usually, this is like a real journalism outlet. Sorry, zone coverage.
I was gonna say, wow. Yeah. I was gonna say something worse, but you're good. All right, never mind. We're fine.
Yeah, but like, sorry, Tom, but you know what you did, Tom. But sorry, Tom Schreier owns zone coverage or runs zone coverage. But yeah, I was like, okay, sure, fine, whatever. And they like rolled out a couple of different social media policies, and every new iteration of the social media policy would make me saying I'm the Chiefs co-owner like still against the social media policy, right? And every time I'd be like, so are we good? And they'd be like, yeah, it's fine. Like, oh, yeah, okay, fine, sure. And then when Pro Football Network hired me, I read their social media policy and I was like, okay, I'm the national reporter now. So I got rid of it in my bio. And then Pro Football Network, when they announced it, referenced that in the tweet. And I was like, oops. Oh, it was cool? Oh, God. Oh. But I still haven't put it back because I'm like, it's kind of weird to put it back. So that's where we're at.
That's funny. Let's go to Kenneth Allen, who asks, now that we know the contract number, what would have been the most realistic trade someone could make for Jefferson? Assuming that they would have to sign him to the same contract, what's the maximum like draft capital worth doing that and trading away picks?
So when Tyreek Hill was traded, and Hill is like, obviously AJ Brown's the only other one, but Hill and Brown are like the best examples we have. So Hill was traded for a first, a second, and a fourth that year, and then a fourth and a sixth the next year, right? And the cap liabilities and the cash liabilities of Hill and AJ Brown are proportionally smaller than they are for Jefferson. And so it would probably be the case that you trade him for less, even though you could make the argument like Jefferson's better than AJ Brown. Jefferson's as good as, if not a little bit better than Tyreek Hill. But the contract is just a little bit more onerous. And so it's a little bit more difficult for a team to generate an advantage with that contract. And if that's the contract he would have demanded from another team in a trade negotiation or whatever, right, then it would be more difficult. So I'm guessing it's still a first and a second. Maybe you deprecate that second to next year, though. And then I don't know if you're going to get the fourths and sixths that you got out of it. So first this year, second next year, and that sounds so low. I'm sorry. But the contract is just, it's genuinely much bigger. I wrote about it over at Wide Left, about like it is much bigger. There's a reason for it, and I think it's good. I think that the Vikings are getting value out of it, but it is a significantly more, damaging, but a contract that carries significantly more liabilities to it.
Also from Kenneth Allen, is the gap between Jefferson and the next best wide receiver bigger or smaller than the gap between Mahomes and the next best quarterback?
Between Jefferson and the next best wide receiver, smaller. But between Jefferson and the third best, because I think it's Tyreek Hill, the third best or the fourth best or the fifth best, I'd say it's quite similar to Mahomes versus second, third, fourth, fifth. Whoever you think the second, third, fourth, fifth is, whether Lamar Jackson is in there or Justin Herbert's in there or ones that people actually put in the top five. I mean, they're in my top five, but I think not a lot of people's top five. Who like, I don't know, the quarterback situations of Josh Allen, obviously. Josh Allen's number two. That's not actually close at all. He's definitely number two. But like, however you rank your quarterbacks, Jalen Hurts maybe somewhere in there, despite the year that he had. I think that the distance between Jefferson and Hill is relatively small. In the piece, I outlined why you would make the argument that Jefferson is better than Hill, but I don't think the argument is like blow out of the water, incredible. This is definitive. But I think between like Jefferson and AJ Brown or Jefferson and Devontae Adams or Jefferson, whoever the third, fourth, fifth best is, it's so clearly the case. So I go through a couple of different metrics in that piece. I go through like PFF wins above replacement. I go through Sports Info Solutions points added. I use PFF grade. I use yards per out run. I use a couple of different metrics. And Jefferson places first or second in every single one of them. But the player he places second to changes. So in yards per out run, it's number one, Tyreek Hill, number two, Justin Jefferson. And this is over the lifetime of Jefferson's NFL career, so 2020 on. But in wins above replacement, it's first Cooper Kupp and then Justin Jefferson. And I believe in points added from Sports Info Solutions, it's like Devontae Adams and then Justin Jefferson. And so it's a different player at number one, and it's Jefferson number one or number two every single time. And so in the aggregate of all of these, if you, for whatever reason, decide to average them out, if you think that's an appropriate manipulation of these statistics or weight them towards whichever one is better, he would come out number one, right? But I think Tyreek Hill is close. But I think nobody else gets into that arena. Double team rate is also maybe a good way to look at it, like how teams double team him, and there's a chart in there that shows like the difference between Jefferson and everybody else in double team rate is just astonishing. It's truly incredible. And my argument is that Jefferson and Hill are the only two receivers in the NFL right now that have this gravity that changes coverages in ways that like AJ Brown doesn't, Cooper Kupp doesn't, Devontae Adams doesn't. No other receivers except for Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson do this, where they consistently alter coverages. And for Jefferson, we see that in double team rate. For Hill, we see that in the safety rotation. You have two high safeties much more often against Tyreek Hill. But they alter coverages and they make coverages more predictable, and the geometry of the defense inexorably changes because of the existence of these two players. That does not occur for any other receiver. And so I think the distance between Jefferson and AJ Brown is relatively vast at the top compared to, say, the best linebacker and the third best linebacker, or the best tackle and the third best tackle. For Trent Williams over the past 5 years versus Tristan Wirfs over the past 5 years would be like a pretty decent. That distance is much smaller than between Brown and Jefferson. And so, it is pretty stunning, but I wouldn't say that it's the same as the distance between Mahomes and Allen. That one is a pretty big one. Mahomes is an alien. Jefferson is just an all-time great. There's a difference.
Let's go to Adam West, who says, not a question, but more of a request. I'd like to hear Arif laugh more about the idea that Lamb should be paid more than Jefferson because he did more rushing the ball and on special teams during his first 4 years in the league. Prepare your gut laugh.
This tweet, okay. I could do the laugh. So from people tell me that they love my laugh, which is great news because it's like about the only quality I have. So that's fantastic. But yeah, this tweet is nuts. So I'm gonna read the tweet. I'm gonna laugh at it. So RJ Ochoa, who covers the Dallas Cowboys, tweets out a stat head comparison, and says, beyond the general principle of supply and demand, which is a significant thing, it will not be hard for CeeDee Lamb and his representation to argue that he should be paid more than Justin Jefferson.
Wow. Just wow.
In the tweet, in the picture, this is the stat head comparison tool, which is the most abused statistical tool in sports. It's so bad. And I have complained about the way statistics are used in other sports for general media purposes a lot. But it's so bad. So it starts with head-to-head record. 3-0 for CeeDee Lamb. Congrats. You got him. You got him. Games played 66-60. PFR approximate value 53-49. Receptions 395-392. Clear win for CeeDee Lamb. Now, mind you, Justin Jefferson does beat him in total receiving yards and in yards per reception. But these are minor. These are the only two wins that he has for the next 10 statistics. CeeDee Lamb beats him in receiving touchdowns and rushing attempts and rushing yards and rush yards per attempt and rushing touchdowns and punt return attempts and punt return yards and kick return attempts and kick return yards and kick return touchdowns. Now, Jefferson does win in some small statistic called fantasy points. Okay. And then neither of them have a championship, and they tie in Pro Bowls. And Jefferson does have some minor wins here, more all-pros and more offensive player of the years. But, I mean, if you just look at the number of columns that are green on CeeDee Lamb's side and the number of columns that are green, the number of rows, that are green on Justin Jefferson's side, I mean, it's not close. It wouldn't be hard at all for CeeDee Lamb's representation to argue that CeeDee Lamb should be paid more. I mean, he had one kick return. Jefferson's had none. How could you, the best paid receiver in the NFL doesn't return kicks? What are you, a diva? What's going on here? And hey, CeeDee Lamb has two more receiving touchdowns. Two more. That's crazy that you let that happen. All for many more yards per game. Are you crazy? The game's about scoring. So I quote tweeted that with Lamau, but with as many O's as Twitter would let me have. And that wasn't enough O's. So then I had 160 more O's in the next tweet, and then 160 more O's after that. And that felt
that was appropriate. That worked.
That felt right. Yeah. So when this is not going to turn political, but like when Donald Trump the verdict had been reached, like the 34 counts or whatever, I started tweeting up all kinds of stuff, and I was like, man, this is going to be such a great day for Twitter. I'm going to get so many engagements. I'm going to have a tweet hit like 1,000 today. And there were some other funny things that happened that day, right? It's a crazy day for Twitter, right? Because the Wolverine popcorn thing came out. And then a second thing happened that was incredibly funny. And it just got overshadowed by the Donald Trump thing. The second thing was huge. Oh, it was Darren Waller's music video.
It was the most divorced man ever singing. Yeah.
Yeah. Like Elon Musk could sing and put out a music video and it would be less divorced than this one, right? Like
I could put out a video and it would be less divorced than that.
Well, that's not fair. You're good at music. But
I'm not good at being divorced.
You are? Okay, yeah, tremendous at it. It was so like I had like tweets about the Darren Waller thing and the Donald Trump thing, and I was like, man, this is gonna be great. And I had like one tweet hit 1,000 likes, which I know like the rich are complaining about, how much money they have. They only have like $10,000. Yeah, 1,000 likes is hard for a lot of people to hit, but for me, I wanted to. Like a good day is when you get like a 2,000 or 3,000 like tweet. And I was like, I'm not asking for much, just 1,000 likes today. This is such a great day. There's so many funny jokes you make. Not a one, maybe one crossed the line the next day. Last I checked, that one was at like 800. I was like, man, I didn't have it that day. I didn't have it on a day where everybody was sinking shots. I was just my shots were going in, but they're going in off the backboard. They were close to rimming out. Like, I just didn't really have it, you know? That sucks. Next day. And then this tweet that is just the 4 letters, LMAO, but then O a lot of times, hits 1,000 like real fast. I have no idea what works on this app.
It's all smoke and mirrors and adult entertainment legally on the app now.
Okay, I want to talk about that for just a second. We're in the mailbag section. Nothing matters. So
Arif in bio.
Right? So Elon Musk announces that adult content is now allowable on the app, and like it always was. Like there are sex workers, creators who have Twitter accounts, and they tweet explicit material, and Twitter has an option in the app when you tweet something out that this is sensitive material, right? That this is like adult entertainment. And you can't access a lot of these creators without an account, right? The creator marks that the profile is sensitive. And so if you haven't already opted in, you have to click yes, view profile. And in order to click yes, view profile, you have to have an account. And so if you don't have an account and you click on the profile, you don't see anything, right? So it's clearly an indication that adult content is allowed because there are options that better enable adult content creators to exist on a public platform. Okay, great. So why would he announce that? It's because he doesn't want to clean up the bot problem, obviously. All the porn bots and everybody's freaking replies, it's nuts. Because before, they were funny to me, right? When it was just the one, Rosie, I miss you. I can't believe I'm saying this. Rosie,
come back.
The tweet, come back. The world needs you. Because she wouldn't tweet any words. It would just be like a picture, and the picture was like risque, but it wasn't like 18 plus. And almost all of the time, the spam would catch it, and it'd be a link to it. We talked about this the last episode for some reason. It'd be a link to an OnlyFans. I don't know if the OnlyFans is real, but maybe. I don't know. I trust Rosie more than I trust any of these bots. Bots nowadays are not trustworthy at all. And like, okay, so you had to click view more replies, and then you had to click yes, view sensitive material to see the picture that Rosie so helpfully provided, which was merely a preview of adult. It was a suggestion that there was adult content. And then other people started doing it. I think Megan was one. There's like a weird, like a BAI or something like that was one. But yeah, okay, so that happened. But now it's just porn. It's just like, and the filter sometimes doesn't catch it. So like your first reply is just a gaping a-hole. And there's no view sensitive. It's just there. And you're like, oh, was my take that bad? Like, goodness.
I didn't know that the proper response to my message was goatsy.
Yeah, I was just like, what? So so it's just like worse now. And Elon's response is like, oh, but now that's allowed actually now for sure. Thanks, man.
Well, it's the lazy way out. You know what? I can appreciate that to a certain extent. One super divorced person to another. Let's go to Hyundai for one of us, who asks, has there ever been a better day on Vikings Twitter to bury people with their old takes and urinate all over their graves? Non-Sean Payton edition.
There have been some pretty good days. So I don't do it as often, which I know for a lot of people comes as a surprise. But I used to be like real vicious about finding old takes and dunking on them. And I did it back when Everson Griffin was on this like run of like this before he got injured in London against Cleveland, right? He was like hitting a sack a game or whatever, right? So he had at least one sack a game, and he was on pace to break the sack record, right? It was an incredible run. And I started retweeting a bunch of takes from when the Vikings had extended him to a very good starting edge rusher deal. And a bunch of people were like, this guy is a rotational guy. He's never done anything. I think I wrote a piece for, I think it was like Vikings territory at the time that was like, this is a great idea. Good job, Vikings. And so I was insulated. I could just be like, I could just point to that. And I like retweeted a bunch of people that I was like, it doesn't look good anymore, huh? And I've stopped doing that. Like I don't do that as much anymore or at all really. Unless it's like Florio talking about the wide receiver market versus running back. Like that was weird. I actually made it into my piece, that tweet. I was like, what's going on here? But I don't really do that as much anymore. It's like weird because like now that I've been in the industry long enough that you just have to like put out some takes. You just got to know you're going to be wrong. And I don't know. I'm getting soft is what's happening. But this is a great day for it because so many people put out the he's going to get traded takes. Honestly, Kirk Cousins signing with the Falcons was a great day for it. Not for me, right? Because my take was that the Vikings were going to find a way to extend him. I was wrong about that. But a lot of people had that take, and a lot of people had just as strong a take. The Vikings were absolutely not going to extend him. And so that could have been a great day for those people. I didn't see a ton of that, for which I'm grateful, I guess. But that probably is it. When the Vikings actually won a playoff game against the Saints, non-Minneapolis Miracle Edition, but like with Kirk Cousins, it's a pretty good day for it. This one's up there, though.
It's pretty good. Let's go to Jack Rackham, who asks, how will Bukowski frame the JJ extension as good for the Packers and bad for the Vikings?
This one's easy. So the Packers keep on finding receivers in the mid to late rounds, technically also including the second round. That's where Devontae Adams was. That's where I think Donald Driver was. That's where Greg Jennings was. They find all these receivers in the second round. But they also find receivers in the fourth, fifth, sixth rounds. They found like Jaden Reed in the fifth round or something like that. Their next best receiver, Dontavian Wicks, I think is a seventh rounder. And then obviously they've got fourth rounder Romeo Doubs and second rounder Christian Watson, which might be their worst receiver out of those four. But if I'm Bukowski and I'm take crafting here, I'm bad faithing. I'm saying the Vikings paid above market value once you account for cash flow, which is basically the argument I made, except that it's fine that you're getting wins in a unique way. For a guy where you can't even know that he's the top receiver coming off of a season where he's injured, whereas the Packers, they could just keep on finding receivers in the second through seventh rounds. It's always cheap, and they're always going to find top-level targets, and if you could just consistently produce Justin Jeffersons, you wouldn't have to worry about this, but the Vikings don't scout as well as the Packers, and so they can't find receivers. That's how I would do it if I was Bukowski. That the Vikings overpaid in a way that no other team has ever overpaid a player in history, which there is some halfway statistical argument to make that claim. And then that the Packers keep on finding cheap ways to add receivers. The people excoriated the Packers for not signing Devontae Adams, but look where they are now. They have Jaden Reed. You don't need Devontae Adams. You got Jaden Reed. That's what I would do if I were him.
Why can't you just make the whole plane out of mid to late draft picks?
Yeah, it's the same argument Steelers fans made until the last couple of drafts. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, that. They got a wonderful couple of quarterbacks on their staff now. What an amazing time to be a Steelers fan. Zach asks, which team do you think gets screwed over the most because of this deal and extending their receivers? Bengals with Chase, not including Higgins. Cowboys with CeeDee Lamb, which may force them to gut the roster if they keep Dak. Or the Niners with Ayuk.
So the Niners have presumably a framework in place for a trade for Ayuk with somebody. So if they can't get something to work out, they've already put out the feelers. Teams have already come up with what that trade structure would look like. It's not going to be very difficult for them to negotiate because the negotiating framework's in place. So if Ayuk takes a look at the Jefferson deal and goes, hey, the actual cash flow of that contract is something I want, and the Niners go, absolutely not. Are you kidding me? There's going to be a team that they could. So I think the Niners are at the bottom of this list. I don't know that the Bengals are at that spot with Chase. I think the reason that the Higgins thing isn't going well is because they're anticipating Chase. And so I think that they're scrimping and scrounging and saving to find ways to get enough money in escrow to keep Jamar Chase. So I don't actually think that I think it's CeeDee Lamb. I think that's the one. I think, whether or not someone sent CeeDee Lamb RJ Ochoa's tweet about getting paid more than Justin Jefferson, I think his expectation is that he gets paid just as much, right? And I think for people who don't watch the Cowboys that often, which, fair enough.
They're on
Also
national
hard.
TV a lot, but yeah, you kind of have to
Yeah.
go out of your
Yeah.
way to not watch
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. It would be difficult. And you just take a look at, like, let's say, CeeDee Lamb's Pro Football Reference page, where for the first 2 years, it's not that great. Last year, of course, CeeDee Lamb had like 1,700 yards. He had 12 touchdowns. Great year. Someone in my replies was like, CeeDee Lamb's best year is better than Jefferson's best year, which, first of all, that's like not true.
Like statistically not true.
Yeah, well, in total yards, certainly not. But like, if you wanted to, like, because they were like, it clears, it's like significantly better, which, like, that's clearly not true. Like, you can make the argument using some pretty decent statistics to suggest that CeeDee Lamb's 2023 was better than Jefferson's 2022. Sure. Yards per game, yards per out run. Well, not yards per game, but yards per out run. Sure, that's there. Touchdowns or EPA per play, I guess. But it's not significant. It's not obvious, right? Jefferson clears him by yards by a actually somewhat significant amount, like 50 at least. They have like the same number of first downs, but Jefferson has more yards per reception, and he's got a higher catch rate and a much higher contested catch rate, and all, whatever, right? Fine. But he had a great year this year, and Jefferson has not had to share the field with an at the time premier receiver, right? Like Adam Thielen dropped off around the time Justin Jefferson came online, right? And obviously Stephon Diggs was traded in order for the Vikings to have acquired Justin Jefferson in the first place. And Jordan Addison turned into a fairly good receiver at about the time Jefferson got injured, right? So there wasn't a lot of time for him to split targets. Now, I think the best faith version of this is like, well, there's TJ Hawkinson. That's fair. It's a good point. But, CeeDee Lamb is sharing the field with Amari Cooper, and Amari Cooper was the primary target. My argument would be, hey, any team that Jefferson's on, he's the primary target. I don't care if Amari Cooper's on that team. It's crazy that you'd be like, well, CeeDee Lamb was the second guy, so his stats aren't as good. Then he should have been the second guy, I think. So, yeah, but he's a very good receiver. He is a top 5, probably-ish receiver in the NFL, depending on where you put Devontae Adams now that he's had 2 years that have been kind of disappointing. It's like Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, and then there's a bunch of receivers. CeeDee Lamb is a candidate for that. Cooper Kupp, maybe, if you're not too worried about the last 2 years as well. So, great. So he is a very good receiver, and he might be of the opinion that he's almost as good as Justin Jefferson, and by some measurements, he could almost be in that territory by particular metrics, especially because he's had a better quarterback throwing to him. That's not even a knock on Kirk Cousins. That's just, I think Dak Prescott is extremely good. And in a way that I think is more than most people, I think that. Okay, I don't know that, given that the Cowboys have overextended themselves in a bunch of different ways over the cap and over individual players, that they would be able to do that for CeeDee Lamb. So I think that this screws over the Cowboys the most out of those three, because CeeDee Lamb will continue to make arguments or have arguments that he deserves a lot of money in light of the Justin Jefferson contract. Not Ochoa more money or easily more money, but certainly enough to say, I also deserve at least $35 million a year for the first 3 years of this contract. And maybe a team is only going to give him 33, but that team's probably not going to be the Cowboys. So, yeah, I think the Cowboys. And if they do, then, like the tweet says, they'll have to make some decisions on players like Zach Martin and Tyron Smith, both of whom are like veterans but are paid a lot. And then the defense, right, because they got like Micah Parsons and Trevon Diggs coming up, and all. It's going to be rough how they handle those contracts if they keep CeeDee.
Yeah, CeeDee is going to end up being the number one wide receiver for like the Panthers or something, based on the sheer number of people they have to sign in Dallas.
Yeah,
they've had
a lot.
I mean,
it's a lot.
Yeah, they kind of have everybody happening at once. Like what's going to happen with Green Bay in a year or two when all the rookie contracts go up. Like, oh crap, we have to pay all of you. Oh, this is not good at all. So this is somehow good for us and bad for the Vikings, though. We have to figure out that. But
Right.
let's go to McCarthy and the Red Scare, who asks, "How are we now going to get out of the cap hell that we'll be paying with Jefferson, Darisaw, McCarthy, Turner, Hawkinson, and Jackson in 2029? Why isn't Kwesi prioritizing the future?"
Yeah, bad move by Kwesi. Can't believe he would sign good players.
It's like
Only rookies.
It's like the guy in the fantasy draft who picks everyone that has the same bye week.
What a dummy, only drafting good players in certain years. Yeah, I mean, the best team has the most cap space, is what we often say. And so, I mean, it's just an NFL truism at this point. So, yeah, I mean, Kwesi clearly screwed this up.
I mean, that's why the Saints have so many championships, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Their cap space is quite magical every year. Eldon asks, question for Arif's contract negotiations corner. Are you worried that Jefferson's contract will increase the asking price of Arif Hassan's next contract? And is it true that Mike Florio is being traded for multiple podcasts?
Okay, first, I want to get ahead of the Mike Florio rumors. We are not trading anything for Mike Florio. We are not in discussions with NBC Sports for Mike Florio. We have not held discussions with anybody to acquire Mike Florio.
That is the official position of Norse Code LLC.
Yeah. As for Wide Left's position on Arif Hassan's contract, Arif Hassan and Wide Left have recently entered into a new contract that gave him a substantial raise, well-deserved. Both he and the company are extremely happy with this arrangement. In light of new contract scenarios across the NFL coverage landscape, it may seem as if something has changed, but these were all well anticipated by Wide Left and well anticipated by Arif Hassan's negotiating party. And so actually Wide Left and Arif Hassan got well ahead of the changes in the NFL coverage landscape when they agreed last week to give Arif Hassan a quite substantial raise. So there's nothing we have to worry about on that front. That's Wide Left's official statement. If you want to talk to Arif Hassan, you could ask him, but he'll say the same thing.
And as a pundit who likes to speak out of both sides of my mouth, let me just say that Arif, there's been a lot of discussions about Arif being traded because he's unhappy, quite frankly. He's clearly unhappy because he hasn't signed any formal deal and let people know outside of this very moment. So I feel like this is coming. I feel like they may not be able to get Florio, but it's obvious that Arif is going to leave now that Dusty has left the podcast. And go to and anyone who says otherwise is clearly just a Dusty hater.
And frankly, to add on, as the co-host of the Norse Code Podcast, to add on to that, James, there's a glut of available podcasters. We saw what SB
the market's
Nation did.
Flooded, quite frankly.
Yeah, a bunch of great podcasters are out there. So I don't see why any franchise would pay Arif Hassan that kind of price.
Nope, you absolutely shouldn't. It's bad for the Vikings and good for the Packers. So should be the show title. Let's go to Greg Joseph's Cleats, who asks, what is the analytical value of a high-level receiver in an offense in comparison to a high-level tackle? Please translate this value proportionally to the amount of burgers for a wider contextual gap. For a wider contextual grasp.
Incredible question. Last week, we discussed grills and the fact that Consumer Reports categorizes grills by the amount of burgers that you can grill on them, which is an incredibly useful metric. Like 100%. They do give you, I didn't add this last time. They do give you the grilling coverage area in inches, but you can't conceptualize that as easily as the number of patties I'm grilling at the same time. Fantastic.
This goes past metric. This goes past standard American. This is the burger. This should be at every hardware store in the country. Like this is the size per like how many burgers it is, how many burgers high your ladder is. Like it's perfect.
So I was able to grab Pro Football Focus's wins above replacement numbers for the 2016 to 2023 seasons. Don't ask me how I did it. I definitely paid for it. The top 5 receivers in wins above replacement over the course of those years per 1,000 snaps had wins above replacement of 0.593, 0.587, 0.554, 0.545, and 0.501. So the top receiver adds about a 60% of a win over the course of 1,000 snaps, which is about 16 games, not quite 17. That might seem low to you, and I think it probably is. I think that the way PFF calculates wins above replacement undervalues elite players at the top of their position by a fair amount. So, like, I think it does a pretty good job in players ranked like 5th through 500th, essentially, at their position. But I think it does a pretty poor job of indexing that all the way up to elite players. But that's what you got. For tackle, the number 1 tackle, so the number 5 receiver is 0.501, so 50% of a win over a 16-game season. I know we have 17-game seasons now, but I did it over 1,000 snaps, so that's what you get. So 501 was 5th. Number 1 tackle is 0.422. So the number 1 tackle is not even in the top 5 of receivers. In fact, I believe it's not even in the top 10. And so an elite tackle is worth quite a bit. And I should point out that technically over the past 5 years, at least, so this was between 2016 and 2023, which includes players who have had these really long careers where maybe the beginning and the end of their careers are much lower. And so these are artificially depressed in some way. For just 2022 to 2023, so those 4 years, Trent Williams had a higher wins above replacement than any receiver. So I do want to add that there is a player that did that. But generally speaking, the top receiver will be worth more wins than the top tackle. And the 10th best receiver will be worth more than the top tackle. And the thing is, tackle is one of the most valuable positions using the PFF WAR metric. So, that's like good and interesting context. And it is sometimes specific to I shouldn't say sometimes, it is specific to the player in a sense because it continuously uses on-off metrics to help define its value. So for example, nose tackles, generally speaking, in PFF wins above replacement are negative. And I think that that's wrong. I think that they calculated the math incorrectly, but using their math, it's negative. Linval Joseph in 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. So in those 4 years, Linval Joseph was positive every single year. So you can and I imagine Dexter Lawrence is like the same thing. He's incredible. He's like the number 3 run stopping nose tackle and the number 1 by an insane margin pass rushing nose tackle. It's like not even in the same area code. It's crazy. And so he's probably in that case. So I do want to say that it is sometimes specific to the player. When you take the player off, the performance changes. So it isn't just indexed to the position they play, but the impact that they've had on the team when they're on or off the field. But that can be hard to identify sometimes. So I would argue that a wide receiver is worth probably about 8 burgers per season, about 8. A tackle is worth about 6. You're not going to turn down a top tackle. 6 burgers is great. I'd love to have 6 burgers right now. But if you could choose between the top receiver and the top tackle, you're taking the top receiver.
I'd like 6 burgers right now. Ingram's left arm asks, as a random follow-up to last episode's Florham Park discussion, did anyone mention the Wilf's business location is in the exact same area? It's within like 14 minutes.
Yes and no. So the Wolves have a number of quote-unquote business locations throughout New Jersey and in other states as well. So they've got Garden Homes and Garden Commercial, essentially. So the real estate developers, they've got real estate businesses. And the headquarters for Garden Homes is within 14 minutes of Florham Park of a drive. It's in an unincorporated city. Plus, in addition to that, there are properties owned by Garden Homes and Garden Commercial Properties that are closer. The properties don't matter. It's not as if Jefferson's going to go to a random apartment that's owned by Ziggy Wolf and then talk to Ziggy Wolf there. That's weird. That sounds like the scene in Hard Knocks when Darrelle Revis talks to the Jets cap guy in that random diner, which ruled, actually. That was a great scene. But that's probably not happening here. I would say that still doesn't matter. Why would he be at the headquarters? Ziggy Wolf actually does not spend that much time, in my understanding, at the actual business headquarters of his real estate development firm. He spends a lot of his time in Minnesota. Like, I think he pays so wherever you live, 6 months in a day where you live, but not literally the amount of days that you're in a state. It's you designate a home, and at some point you have to spend time in that home. You can the taxes for which state you live in are so complicated because you can spend less time in the state you live in than the state you work in and be a tax citizen of that state. But there is some element of 6 months in a day. I don't know. Maybe it's like paying a lease or a mortgage, and he probably doesn't do either of those things. So maybe
if only we had an accountant we could run this by.
We don't got to talk to people who actually know what they're talking about. You know that.
Well, and she and I are fighting, so.
Right, yeah. It's in the Discord. But he spends a lot of time in Minnesota. He's probably a tax citizen in New Jersey, but he spent a lot of time in Minnesota. If you wanted to talk to Wilf, there's a bunch of locations in Minnesota he could do it. And it's not as if this was a discrete location. A bunch of people reported that he was in Florham Park. I think it's still a mystery as to why he was in Florham Park. That's weird to me. It didn't mean anything. And at the time I said it didn't mean anything. But it is funny, and I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that the headquarters of Garden Homes Properties is within essentially a 15-minute drive of the city of Florham Park. Why would he meet him there? That you just do it in Miami. You just do it somewhere fun, not New Jersey. Why would it have to be at the headquarters of his real estate development firm?
Are you saying that New Jersey isn't fun?
For any people visiting New Jersey during the World Cup, no. For anybody hoping to make vacation plans, who live in the United States, yes, absolutely.
Just don't take a lift from MetLife. You'll live to regret it if you live.
If you live, yeah.
Sean asks, can we confirm whether the amount of cheesecake factories per capita made an impact as to why Jefferson decided to extend his contract in Minnesota?
How many cheesecake factories are there in Minnesota? There's a fair amount in my experience, but very limited viewpoint. Certainly there's one in Eden Prairie. Being at that one a fair amount. Yeah, I'm gonna say yeah. It made an impact. I'll ask him next time I talk to him. Hey, the number of cheesecake factories change your decision about which team you're going to sign with? He'd probably say yes.
It's important to this is hard-hitting journalism, not speaking out of both sides of your mouth. Let's go to a bit of a important topic for the show. This particular episode, Deez asks, can you talk about how ESPN and other major media outlets are really poorly handling the Clark and women's sports discourse?
Thank you, Deez, for setting me up so perfectly for that after I told you we were going to talk about it on the show. Thank you for that. An alley-oop, if you will. That was bad. I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. So I've been paying a lot of attention to women's basketball this year, and I've paid a fair amount of casual attention to women's basketball for the past couple of years. The links weren't that good, so it was kind of difficult for me to pay attention. They're very good this year. Their defense is pretty phenomenal, and Nafisa Collier, or Fee, is just playing lights out, better than she ever has. Fantastic. And a lot of that is because I'm friends with Matthew Collar and Sloan Martin, and they're both big enthusiasts of women's basketball, but also they're just elements of the game that I very much enjoy watching. Also, I make money on Prize Picks with women's basketball. It's actually surprisingly easy. I don't know why that is. I'm gonna get buried now. I'm not gonna make any more money on Prize Picks because of that. But I've been following a fairly decent amount and a lot this year. And so the way that people have talked about Caitlin Clark has bothered me for some time. And then after this incident with Kennedy Carter, it has bothered me a lot. I even actually tweeted about it. I don't tweet that much about other sports. I actually tweeted about it this time. it's insane, like what's happening here with Clark and its impact on the way that people talk and discuss women's basketball. To the point where no one is paying attention to people who have covered women's basketball for years. Like people who, like Lindsay D'Arcangelo, who has followed women's basketball and covered women's basketball for a very long time, or Brittany De La Cretaz, right, or Monica McNutt, right, who just got into a tiff and won really handily with Stephen A. Smith, or any of these people, Ogwumike, like any of these people that have talked about women's basketball for years. No one is listening to them about the nature of the league, and they are making up, I think, out of thin air. And I'm not talking about the people that are tweeting at me because they're responding to the people who are making up out of thin air what they think the athletes in the WNBA think of Caitlin Clark. It is infuriating to me, and no one has any context for any of this. So, for example, no one seems to understand that when they see a clip of Caitlin Clark getting fairly rough treatment, and again, I'm not talking about the Kennedy Carter thing because it's unfair to characterize that as fairly tough. That should have been a flagrant. That was a bad foul. But getting fairly rough treatment, that those are the only clips they see of fairly rough treatment. And so they think that Caitlin Clark is getting like unfairly targeted. They didn't see Alyssa Thomas grab Angel Reese by the neck and slam her to the ground, which, by the way, in that game was the second time Alyssa Thomas did something insane to Angel Reese. And she wasn't the only one. Jonquel Jones of the New York Liberty shoulder checked Angel Reese off ball and sent her flying into the ground. And I'm going to say this, and this is not a judgment on Caitlin Clark. She was right to do this. But Caitlin Clark clearly flopped on that, and she should have. That was an insane thing for Kennedy Carter to do, and I'm going to give context for that in a second. But, like, absolutely your job in that situation is to make that look as bad as possible. Good job, Caitlin Clark, for doing that. But when Angel Reese got sent flying to the floor by Jonquel Jones, which I don't think I've seen anyone tweet about, by the way. Like, I saw a couple of people tweet about the Alyssa Thomas thing. Angel Reese was taken completely by surprise, and just, like, when she fell to the floor, that was just genuine. There was no, like, flopping there. She just, boom, went. And that was a bigger surprise than what Kennedy Carter did, and that was a huge surprise, right? No one is paying attention to the fact that, like Cameron Brink's head hit the floor after Monique Billings, and this was like it wasn't like an intentional, it wasn't like the Jonquel Jones thing, or the Kennedy Carter thing, but it was like a really rough play, and it should have been called a foul. Again, it wasn't intentional, but it should have been called a foul, and no one caught anything. And no one seems to like get that they're getting an overexposure to Caitlin Clark, and only in the context of this particular narrative that the league hates Caitlin Clark. So, one, you see more tweets about Caitlin Clark because they go viral way more than tweets about Angel Reese or Cameron Brink or any of the other rookies. So, like 6 rookies this year have played over 100 minutes in the WNBA. It's Angel Reese, it's Caitlin Clark, it's Cameron Brink, of course. Kate Martin has played a ton of minutes. So Kate Martin also played with Caitlin Clark at Iowa. She is probably the last draft pick to have made the team and played substantial minutes. So the latest draft pick to play substantial minutes out of all the rookies, out of the 6 rookies in the WNBA that have played so far. Rakia Jackson has played over 100 minutes. So she and Cameron Brink were drafted together. And Aaliyah Edwards, the Washington Mystic. They've all played. So out of all of those players that have played over 100 minutes, we see way more Caitlin Clark stuff. And that's not because the stuff isn't happening to Angel Reese, that the stuff isn't happening to Rakia Jackson, that the stuff isn't happening, well, it kind of isn't happening to Kate Martin, but that's a different thing. Or Aaliyah Edwards or anything like that. It's because Caitlin Clark tweets go viral because Caitlin Clark is very popular. So that's one. 2, it happens more often to Caitlin Clark because she plays more games than everybody else. This isn't because the Fever think that she's worth more in play or more minutes per game or anything like that. She's playing about as many minutes per game as Cameron Brink in games where Cameron Brink doesn't foul out, which is a problem that she has. It's because the Indiana Fever have been scheduled for more games early in the season. So when the Kennedy Carter thing happened, that was the 11th game that the Indiana Fever played that season. The Las Vegas Aces, who won the championship last year, had only at that point played 5. They played 6, I think, by the end of that night. She played twice as many games as Asia Wilson, who is playing like the best season of her career, and she should have been the MVP last year, right? Like she's playing so good right now. No, sorry, she's playing insane basketball right now. I was watching the Aces against the Lynx. I was watching with Caller, and Caller was like, Asia Wilson is on track to be the best player in WNBA history right now. And that's not like fake or sensational or in the moment thing. That's like if you're watching Patrick Mahomes and saying he's on track to be the best player in the NFL history. That's just true. And she's playing lights out. That person didn't get scheduled for as many national games as Caitlin Clark. So you're seeing more people. So Caitlin Clark is not only playing more games, she's also getting scheduled for more national games. So she gets more NBA TV games, she gets more ESPN games, she gets more ABC games than the Las Vegas Aces, than the LA Spark, right? So more people see those games. Those games happen more often, at least thus far. And Caitlin Clark is an inveterate trash talker. Again, I love that. I think that's great. Talk your trash. But there's a consequence to that. She throws elbows and she talks trash. And I had I make this point that like, hey, Caitlin Clark throws elbows and talks trash. Like she's going to get a rough treatment, especially because she's a guard, right? Like Reese and Brink are centers. Rakia Jackson's a forward. Like, I mean, I guess Brink is technically a forward, but she plays center. Actually, they should make her play center more often. She plays on the rim, on the edge way too often. But the point is that she's not a bigger player. She's a guard. And so it's a little bit easier to knock her around a little bit. That's just the way it works. She throws elbows a lot and she talks trash a lot. And I made this point in response to somebody's like, I can't believe you're defending Kennedy Carter, which I'm not. I was just making the point that like people think that this is particularized on Caitlin Clark and it's not. I'm like, look, this is going to happen because it happens a lot to Angel Reese and it happens a lot to Cameron Brink, and they play rough. Cameron Brink leads all rookies in personal fouls per game. And like she plays really rough, and sometimes it's because she doesn't know, like she got away with it in college. It's, you know, classic transition thing, but she does more than the other rookies. And Angel Reese talks a lot of trash. That's not surprising, but Caitlin Clark does too. And I tweeted this and someone responded with, I've never heard of that before. Caitlin Clark doesn't talk trash. She doesn't throw elbows. What are you talking about? Provide clips. And it's like, she's so famous for talking trash that her dad had to tell her to shut up, right? She drew 3 technical fouls this year in 11 games, 3 technical fouls just for talking trash. Like, she is it is insane to me that people are like, she doesn't talk trash. You just don't watch the games. And that's like, fine. You don't have to watch the games. But in order for you to have a take that I take seriously, watch the games. And this isn't like a, watch the games versus, the spreadsheets nerd. The game is played on the court, not on the spreadsheet. It's in the spreadsheet. She ranks 4th, not out of rookies, out of all WNBA players in personal fouls. Now, again, she's played more games than everybody else. But if we're using a selection bias effect, she's thrown more elbows. She's committed more fouls, and so has seen more retaliation because she commits those fouls more often. Again, in part because she and this I'm going to make a per game argument in a second, but like in part because she's played more games, and so we're seeing it more often where people retaliate. The Kennedy Carter play. So for people who aren't familiar with this, the clip that goes around is Kennedy Carter. So like, the Chicago Sky score, and so they're setting up for an inbound pass. Last year's Rookie of the Year, Aaliyah Boston, is about to inbound to Caitlin Clark. And before that happens, so the ball's not in play yet, Kennedy Carter walks up and hip checks Clark, and Clark goes flying to the floor. Uncalled for. The ball's not even in play. That should have been a flagrant 2. It got upgraded after the game to a flagrant 1. In the game, it was just called a common foul, unnecessary. And so there's like some free throws. Or it was away from the ball, common foul. A terrible call on the court. But everyone was like, oh my God, the WNBA hates Caitlin Clark. This keeps happening. And it's like, no, Kennedy Carter hates Caitlin Clark. And that's fine, because what happened on the previous play is that Caitlin Clark, and this is, again, I think Caitlin Clark I like her a lot. Like, this isn't like a knock. But for her step back shot, she throws her forearm, which is illegal. She throws her forearm, creates extra space on the step back. and shoots her shot. It doesn't go in. Aaliyah Boston or some other players for the Fever are attempting to capture the rebound. There's a putback attempt. The putback attempt doesn't go, so there's another rebound attempt. And by that time, Clark and Kennedy Carter are somewhat close to the rim. I mean, they're both guards, right? So they're not like right there. And as that second rebound attempt is going in, Clark is flailing and her elbow hits Kennedy Carter in the face. And neither of them get the rebound. It goes to somebody else. And as Clark is moving back to defense, she starts talking trash to Kennedy Carter. Now, if you throw an elbow in someone's face and then talk trash to them, you're going to experience retaliation. That's it. That's just going to happen. And it is insane that we only saw the clip where Kennedy Carter goes after Clayton Clark and act as if it's completely unprovoked. Now, I'm not saying that was a proportional response. Shouldn't have happened. Bad response. Kennedy Carter shouldn't have done that, right? But I understand why Angel Reese congratulated her for that. That is, and I don't understand why Aaliyah Boston didn't start fighting. And I get that the referee saw that. I get that every player interacts differently when that kind of thing happens. And I get that she was going to go help Caitlin Clark up and pointed to the referee and was like, hey, what the heck is this? I get all that. I probably they should have, started a fight. Like, I think that's probably better to start enforcing, right? But like, that is not a contextless play. And so people think that like the WNBA hates Caitlin Clark. And then they make the argument that they actually should be grateful to Caitlin Clark because she's bringing more eyes to the game. And the thing is, that's kind of true, but it's not completely true. If you go to a Lynx game, it's not any more full than it has been in previous years. The Clark effect is primarily localized into two areas: League Pass, which every team in the league does benefit from, and Indiana Fever games, home and away. So she does sell out away games. Great. But like, that doesn't help the Chicago Sky most of the time. And so Clark is elevating the WNBA in really intangible ways, for sure. Like, we're talking about it right now on a football podcast. Stephen A. Smith talked about it. Pat McAfee talked about it. There's a bunch of people talking about it in ways that they wouldn't have if it wasn't for Caitlin Clark. Fine. But it's not like they shouldn't be deferential to her. You should want to beat stars, and that's fine. Just because LeBron elevated the visibility of the NBA by being a super magnetic high school star entering the NBA and immediately kind of performing. And I say kind of, I mean, he had some phenomenal games as a rookie, but he was still struggling. It's not like other teams or other players should have been like, I shouldn't have fouled you that hard. No, that's crazy. And it's crazy the way people are talking about it. And it's crazy that people are talking about it like it should be treated any differently than any other sport. Like, we don't talk about like this, like the NBA. Like if people started fouling Wemby, right? Victor Wembanyama, which they do because he's massive. Sometimes that's the only thing you can do. No one talks about it like it's some crisis of the league. And yeah, the NBA is already established and the WNBA is not established. So there's a difference. But Caitlin Clark is not playing well right now compared to other stars in the league. She's playing very well for a rookie, right? She just won Rookie of the Month. I don't think she should have won it. I think it should have been Cameron Brink. But like, she's playing well for a rookie because rookies don't play well in the WNBA. The only rookie that played well is Candace Parker, and she like won MVP. That it was insane. She's like one of the best prospects the WNBA has ever seen. But for the most part, it takes a couple of years for a player to get good. Sabrina Ionescu was one of the best prospects we've ever seen, actually in the same draft class as Kennedy Carter. And she didn't make an all-star game for 2 years, right? And now she's like shooting threes with Steph Curry at the NBA All-Star game. Great. She's a fantastic player. She deserves it. But it took her a couple of years, right? And so when people got upset that Diana Taurasi was like, there's going to be an adjustment period, which there is now, they thought that Taurasi was hating. Taurasi, by the way, is not just the WNBA points leader. She is the WNBA points leader by like 3,000 points. Like, it's 10,000 points Diana Taurasi, 7,500 or something, second place. Like, which is soon it might be DeWanna Bonner. But like Taurasi, and Taurasi has been around for a long time. I actually kind of hate Diana Taurasi because she knocked out the Gophers in the tournament, like way back when Lindsay Whalen was on the Gophers. But Trossi was correct in win shares per 40 minutes out of all the rookies with at least 100 minutes. So there's only 6, right? Out of those 6 rookies, Caitlin Clark is dead last in win shares per 40, right? So her points per game, pretty good. Not as good as I think people seem to think, but like obviously like pretty good. But the offensive rating when she's on the floor per 100 is 91. The defensive rating is 113, which in basketball higher is worse. Her win shares are minus 0.042. The next worst is Aaliyah Edwards-Blitz for the Washington Mystics, also a bad team. Angel Reese is number 1, Kate Martin's number 2, and so she's like a super sub. She plays like 20 minutes a game on the Las Vegas Aces, who are not a very deep team, but are so top-heavy, it doesn't matter. They're incredible. Kate Martin getting minutes for them is insane. Also, she's much better than I thought she would be. And then Cameron Brink 3, right? Like that's what's happening in win shares. And that's just like one statistic. But Clark... So she's making like what? Trying to look at this points per game for Clark, 16.9 points per game. People are acting as if it's 20, whatever. That's kind of the area where she leads, but like Cameron Brink leads the league by a good margin in block percentage. The percentage of opponents' field goals that are blocked, Cameron Brink leads the league. Incredible. Her defensive rating is fantastic. Her defensive presence is huge. The only thing holding her back is that she's got a fairly high foul rate. And it's not as if Clark doesn't have a high foul rate. I mentioned that the total number of fouls are high, but also the per game fouls are pretty high. She ranks like 9th or something, like in per game fouls. So like 4th in total and like I think top 10 in per game in personal fouls per game. But her turnovers are like insane. So she has like 6.5 assists per game and like 5.9 or something turnovers per game. It is a detriment. She is hurting her team. She has an insane usage rate, which is nice, but like a 27.5 usage rate. Like the next highest is 19.6 among rookies. Like it's so high. But the turnover rate on possessions is 26%. It's so huge. And she's not making up for it with other defense. Like she does have steals and she does have blocks, and they're higher than you'd expect for guards. But her defense primarily is generally not very good. Again, that's fine. She's a basketball genius. Her court vision is incredible. It'll be fine. But like her on-court impact is not that great. Some of that, like, so she averages less than a point per possession on her usage plays. Which is nuts. Some of that is not quite her fault. Like Aaliyah Boston has to be as good as she was last year, grabbing second chance rebounds and stuff like that. But like her effective field goal percentage is like 451 or something. Like it is bad. Her field goal percentage overall, because she shoots a ton of threes, is bad. She gets a lot of points, or 16.9 points per game, right? Because of sheer volume. She is chucking up bad shot after bad shot after bad shot. Someone pointed out to me that her 3-point percentage is okay and her 2-point percentage is okay. And the only reason it's bad is because a disproportionate amount of them are threes. And yeah, those are shot choices that she's making. And they're bad shots. She'll get better. It'll be fine. But she is so limited because she has a couple of hot spots that she shoots from. She's not like Sabrina or Steph, right? Where they can shoot from anywhere. Like people are like, oh, all these logo shots, which are impressive. I love them. They're great. She needs to expand her game to be able to shoot from more spots on the court. Some of those spots are near the logo. Phenomenal. Hard to defend. But she's not sinking the threes. She's not sinking the twos. Her true shooting is garbage. Her effective field goal rate is garbage. And you know, I don't think field goal percentage is everything. Like there was a good argument that Phil Jackson made about Kobe and his field goal percentage, which is that Kobe has to take the tough shots. And so his field goal percentage is going to go down, but it's still the best shot out of everybody else on the court at the time. And so he's the one that has to take a ding to his statistics because he's not hitting the open corner 3 after driving because no one is there. So he has to take a tough contested 2. And that's kind of what she's doing, but it's not enough. It's not anywhere near that level of she has to take a bad shot. She has to pass out of these sometimes, and her passing is not very good right now because sometimes she has this insane vision and it creates a remarkable assist that no one saw coming, and that's incredible. And just as often, it's a turnover and a transition too. Like she's not good right now. She's good for a rookie, but she's not even the best rookie. Like Angel Reese and Cameron Brink are playing better than her. Don't win Rookie of the Year. And and people are acting as if she's God's gift to the WNBA, and she's not even the best rookie. She's not, by any reasonable stretch of the imagination, one of the better players in the league right now. And it's fine that she's popular and fine that people are talking about her, but they're acting as if she's the only player and people are resentful for her, when really they see a couple of incidents and they don't even take into account that Clark talks tremendous trash and throws a couple of elbows every so often, which is, again, a little bit surprising for a guard. But again, it's just part of her game. That's fine. But she gets pushback for that, and people are saying these women are jealous, and they're applying unconsciously or consciously a sexist understanding of how women in sports act, like as if like, oh, these women are emotional and they're resentful and there's envy. And no, they're just playing basketball, and they might be resentful that she got this huge shoe deal that Asia Wilson didn't get until people started talking about like why the best player in the league doesn't have a shoe deal, but like Caitlin Clark does. Like they might be resentful of that, but that's not like what's happening on the court. And it's not as if this represents a majority or all of the players. What Kennedy Carter says isn't representative of what Asia Wilson thinks or what Sabrina Ionescu thinks, what Breanna Stewart thinks, right? It's not representative of what Fee thinks, right? Like it's just a thing that Kennedy Carter says. And people just assume that all of these women hate Caitlin Clark when really they're just playing basketball, and basketball is a physical sport. It just is. And no one's covering it as if it's a sport. They're covering it as if it's a drama, and they're drawing these insane conclusions from it without talking or reading anybody who has followed the sport for a reasonable length of time. Read people who cover the WNBA if you want good, accurate takes what's happening with Caitlin Clark. Because Caitlin Clark is playing extremely promising basketball, extremely fun basketball, and she's drawing huge crowds wherever she goes. And I don't understand what Pat McAfee's argument was. There was like the tweet that went viral because of a James. It's like late in the episode. Can I just say it?
Yeah, go for it.
These white bitches is what he said. Okay, so Awful Announcing did this crazy thing, and I love Awful Announcing. I think they do great journalism, but I think they did Pat McAfee wrong, which is a crazy thing to say, where they cut off the beginning of a clip where he's just talking about these great white players, like literally like actually white, like Diana Taurasi, Breanna Stewart, and Kelsey Plum. And he made a joke about how a lot of people thought Kelsey Plum was Puerto Rican, and she's not, which that's a joke that's been around for a little bit before Pat McAfee. So that's, whatever. And Sabrina Ionescu, right? So Diana, Sabrina, Kelsey Plum, and Breanna Stewart. And he makes a point about all these white players, and then he talks about, this rookie class. No, it's not a rookie class. It's this one white bitch. It just a crazy thing to say. And he apologized for saying that, I guess. And in terms of attracting attention, yeah, Caitlin Clark outpaces. So the reason that Awful Announcing did Pat McAfee wrong here is because McAfee is arguing against the idea that the reason there's more coverage of Caitlin Clark is because she's white. And then he points to 4 very good white players and makes the argument that they're not drawing as many eyeballs as Caitlin Clark. That's what he's doing. I want to make that clear, that he is arguing against the argument that there is a white bias for Caitlin Clark. And I think there is, but it's not that clear, and it's more a product of a number of coverage decisions that started all the way back in Iowa, coming up to here. I think it plays a really significant role, but it's not like, quote unquote, the reason. It can never be the reason. But one thing that has to happen is that women's basketball has to get to a point where people want to watch it before they pay attention to a star. And Caitlin Clark got into that environment and had one of the most fun styles of play that we've ever seen, and succeeded at college level at this blistering pace, and was she's not even like that charismatic, honestly. Again, not a knock. I actually love her personality in ways that have nothing to do with whether or not she's charismatic, but are attractive to networks and stuff. And so she blew up as this huge star in an already existing environment where we care about women's basketball. And that is because, and this is not a knock on Caitlin Clark, who's always been very quick to acknowledge the people that came before her. This is just a knock on the people covering women's basketball that don't cover women's basketball. But in an environment where we were willing to accept women's basketball because of all of the stuff that people like Maya Moore and Diana Taurasi and Kelsey Plum and Sylvia Fowles and all of them created Um, Actually, I don't know why I keep including Kelsey Plum here. I mean, she's very good, but she's not like in GOAT territory like Brianna Stewart or Diana Taurasi. Like it's weird that she was included. Um, but that or like Asia Wilson and all of them, Chelsea Gray, who's injured right now, have helped create, and going all the way back to like Lisa Leslie and Rebecca Lobo and Cheryl Swoops and all that, have helped create that would allow Caitlin Clark to be a star at the college level anyway, right? So it's weird to be like, it's all Caitlin Clark, right? This is a tremendous rookie class. The tremendous rookie class did play a role, I think, in the increased popularity this year. And I know a lot of people are tuning in just because of Angel Reese. A lot of people are tuning in just because of Cameron Brink, and that's great. And not necessarily because they're playing very well, and both of them are playing very, very well. I think we all know, like, they're very attractive people, right? And people like watching attractive people, and that's part of it too. Angel Reese made a point that people like watching villains, and that stories are more interesting when you have a hero and a villain. And I am Caitlin Clark's villain. I like Caitlin Clark. That's not the issue. It's not my personal feelings, but I have been cast as a villain, and I'm happy to play that role. And she made that point, and people called her jealous, and I think they missed what her point was because they wanted to defend Caitlin Clark without really thinking through what Angel Reese was saying, which is that you tuned in to the LSU Iowa game because of the two of us, not because of the one of us. And obviously, Caitlin Clark is the progenitor of that. She's the primary or proximal cause of that. But that LSU game is not nearly as interesting if the biggest villain is Kim Mulkey, who sucks, but is not really the same thing as Angel Reese in that game. So, yeah, and people tuned into the Chicago Sky Indiana Fever game because of Angel Reese's interactions with Caitlin Clark, not just because of Caitlin Clark. So, I mean, I haven't really seen, like, obviously covering like the UFL and the AAF and the XFL. I've seen the way people cover smaller leagues, but I haven't seen the way people cover emergent leagues before. And if this is what it's like, it sucks. I hate this ride. I like the WNBA, but if these are the growing pains, I just want to fast forward, man. This sucks. No one wants to talk about basketball, like, which feels weird, but like the New York Liberty aren't playing as well as they should. That's kind of interesting. Phoenix is playing at a weird pace. Minnesota has a tremendous defense. The LA Spark have maybe the most interesting young core. The Indiana Fever are misplaying their young players not named Caitlin Clark. I don't know what's going on with Aaliyah Boston. We got to talk about that more. What's up with the first round pick from 2 years ago that they just benched for no reason? What's going on there? Should Lexi Hull be getting as many minutes as she like? There's so many interesting storylines here, and like we're not even covering the more like magnetic, photogenic, or charismatic or polemic people. Like no one's covering the fact that Diana Taurasi is near the end of her career, is not nearly as effective as she used to be. Don't tell her I said that; she'll kill me. We're not covering the fact that the Las Vegas Aces are continuing their run without Chelsea Gray, the best player on their team last year, maybe. When really was Asia Wilson, but it doesn't matter. They're two best players in the league playing for the Las Vegas Aces, gets injured in the finals last year, Chelsea Gray does, and they're still playing at this insane, incredible pace. And Kelsey Plum is like the fourth best player on that team, which is nuts. Kate Martin is playing out of her mind. No one's talking about that. She's playing so good. She's not a starter, but she's playing so good. We're not talking about any of that. We're not talking about the fact that the Dallas Wings have continued to fail to support Ogunbowale, and she's doing the Caitlin Clark. She's chucking up shot after shot after shot because she can't trust her teammates, and everything sucks there. And so everybody's getting. We're not talking about the Atlanta Dream, who have like 3 players over 30 that are all playing at an all-star level right now. They're playing, except for last night, they're playing insanely well. No one's talking about it. Like I don't know. There's so many interesting storylines here. And all we're talking about is whether or not the league disrespects Caitlin Clark. Most nights, most of the league isn't thinking about her because they've got their own games to pay attention to, right? Most of the league don't like have a positive or negative opinion about her. She's another player. She's not even playing that well. You might be resentful of the fact that she is getting like these deals that seem unearned. They're not unearned. They're well earned, but they might seem unearned because she hasn't stepped on the court yet. But I imagine that's actually not a large section of the WNBA populace. It is weird to me that there's no evidence that they're specifically jealous of her, but rather that we have constructed a scenario where every statement or action is interpreted as proof of jealousy. It's nuts to me. let Caitlin Clark struggle a little bit. Let the other rookies shine. Let Asia Wilson be the best player in WNBA history. Let's talk about that stuff, man. I hate it.
There was a tweet. There was a tweet earlier
Tweet.
today. Well, I don't talk for a while, and then I mess up immediately. That's the story of this show after 10 years. Closing in on 11. There was a tweet earlier today that was something about, it's very possible that men just are too sensitive to cover the WNBA.
They're too emotional to cover the WNBA. I agree. It's too emotional to be president, too emotional to cover the WNBA. Really, I just don't know. They just haven't kept their hormones in check.
Yeah, there's the toxic masculinity is real. Between that and the tweet that somebody had put out saying that the Vikings releasing the contract details for Justin Jefferson today to distract from Fauci testifying to Congress as a conspiracy theory.
That's good.
Like both of them top tier today.
That's so good.
Well, I feel like going on to like other mailbag questions is kind of a moot point at this point. I feel like we've wrapped up pretty nicely. Arif, what do you have to plug?
I should have written a story about the WNBA. I just felt weird doing it for why I'd left.
Then you'd be part of the problem and not part of the solution at that point.
Well, the story would be pay attention to people who pay attention to the WNBA, not my take is right and all your takes are. That was part of that. So over at Why I Left Off Football, you can find a story on the Justin Jefferson contract. I go into detail about how it's actually quite a bit larger than you think it is based off of the initial reporting of the numbers and why actually that's still worth it and how good he is. That's over there. Like I said, I haven't written a ton of stories over at Wide Left this week. I think I wrote like one last week, probably. About like how good Jordan Love is. And no, that was 2 weeks ago. About how does guaranteed money tell us anything about undrafted free agents. We talked about that in the last episode. But I do want to plug a story that is currently my pinned story at Wide Left Football, which is the artificial intelligence story. I've mentioned it here before, but there's a lot of discussion about artificial intelligence being used in a lot of news environments now and how bad Google's AI results are. And I just wanted to repin that story, re-promote that story, because it's a very, very long, deep dive into the concept of artificial intelligence, which I use in quotes because I don't think we should be calling large language models artificial intelligence, but whatever. By the way, you can turn the AI overview off in Google search, but you can do that by Googling, how do I turn AI overview off in Google search? There is an answer. You just go into Search Labs and turn it off. It took me actually a little bit of time because my computer... I had 300 tabs open. That's not hyperbole. I just literally had 300 tabs open when I did this.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it took some time for me. Yeah. But there's a little like Erlenmeyer flask or beaker or whatever you call it in the top right corner of your Google search. You click on that and it gives you, AI on or off, and you just got to click it off. The problem is when you click off, it takes you to a new page that tells you what AI overview is. So it's not clear to you that you necessarily clicked it off. And because my computer was acting slow, I clicked a bunch of things, so I didn't turn it off right away. Anyway, that turns it off. I recommend doing it because it gives you a lot of bad answers a lot of the time. And most of the answers, they struck a deal with Reddit. Most of the answers are from Reddit, which right. The meme, you're going to get the most accurate answers by putting the word Reddit after your search is kind of true, but it's not true if you're using a search function, which keeps on using random joke comments as their answers. It's one thing for you to specifically look at Reddit knowing what it is. It's another thing for a search to tell you what the answer is, and you find out 10 clicks later it came from a Reddit post. That's bad, actually. Anyway, I recommend that you turn it off, and after you do that, go to read my piece on artificial intelligence and sports writing.
Well, that's going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. For Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember to, you know what? In honor of the season ending, Case Cookus.
Case Cookus.
And we'll be back soon. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif of... and he can be found on Twitter at ArifNFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or at my personal account at BigMono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merch. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
Hey, all things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.